Chapter 4 Pure React. In order to understand how React runs in the browser, we will be working purely with React in this chapter. We will not introduce JSX or JavaScript as XML until the next chapter. You may have worked with React in the past without ever looking at the pure React code that is generated when we transpile JSX into React. You can successfully use React without looking at pure React. However, if you take the time to understand what is going on behind the scenes, you will be more efficient, especially when it comes time to debug. That is our goal in this chapter, to look under the hood and understand how React works. Page setup. In order to work with React in the browser, we need to include two libraries, React and React DOM. React is the library for creating views. React DOM is the library used to actually render the UI in the browser. React DOM, React and React DOM were split into two packages for version 0.14. The release notes state: the beauty and the essence of React has nothing to do with browsers or the DOM. This splitting into two packages paves the way to writing components that can be shared between the web version of React and React Native.1 instead of ASM. In that, React will render only in the browser. Future releases will aim to support REN DOM for a variety of platforms. 2. Lindsay Simon, minimizing browser reflow. 3. Stephen Luscher, building user interfaces with Facebook's React, Supervan.js 2013. 2 cups butter lettuce. 1 yellow squash. A half cup olive oil. 3 cloves of garlic. Class equals instructions. Cooking instructions. Preheat the oven to 350 degrees. Spread the olive oil around a glass baking dish. Add the salmon, garlic, and pine nuts to the dish. Bake for 15 minutes. Add the yellow squash and put back in the oven for 30 minutes. Remove from oven and let cool for 15 minutes. Add the lettuce and serve. In HTML, elements relate to each other in a hierarchy that resembles a family tree. We could say that the root element has 3 children, a heading, an unordered list of ingredients, and a section for the instructions. Traditionally, websites have consisted of independent HTML pages. When the user navigated these pages, the browser would request and load different HTML documents. The invention of Ajax brought us the single-page application, or SPA. Since browsers could request and load tiny bits of data using Ajax, entire web applications could now run out of a single page and rely on JavaScript to update the user interface. In an SPA, the browser initially loads one HTML document. As users navigate through the site, they actually stay on the same page. JavaScript destroys and creates a new user interface as the user interacts with the application. It may feel as though you are jumping from page to page, but you are actually still on the same HTML page and JavaScript is doing the heavy lifting. The DOM API is a collection of objects that JavaScript can use to interact with the browser to modify the DOM. If you have used document.createElement or document.appendChild, you have worked with the DOM API. Updating or charm. In rendered DOM elements in JavaScript is relatively easy. 2. However, the process of inserting new elements is painfully slow. 3. This means if web developers are meticulous about how they make changes to UI, they can improve the performance of their applications. Managing DOM changes with JavaScript efficiently can become very complicated and time-consuming. From a coding perspective, it is easier to clear all the children of a particular element and reconstruct them than it would be to leave those child out. For Mark Wilton Jones, Efficient JavaScript, Dev.Opera, the 2nd of November, 2006. 5 React Docs, Refs and the DOM. Ments in place and attempt to efficiently update them. 4 The problem is that we may not have the time or the advanced knowledge of JavaScript to work efficiently with the DOM API every time we build a new application. The solution is React. React is a library that is designed to update the browser DOM for us. We no longer have to be concerned with the complexities associated with building performance fast because React can do that for us. With React, we do not interact with the DOM API directly. Instead, we interact with a virtual DOM, or set of instructions that React will use to construct the UI and interact with the browser. 5. The virtual DOM is made up of React elements, which conceptually seem similar to HTML elements, but are actually JavaScript objects. It is much faster to work directly with JavaScript objects than it is to work with the DOM API. We make changes to a JavaScript object, the virtual DOM, and React renders those changes for us using the DOM API as efficiently as possible. React Elements. The browser DOM is made up of DOM elements. Similarly, the React DOM is made up of React Elements. DOM elements and React Elements may look the same, but they are actually quite different. A React element is a description of what the actual DOM element should look like. In other words, React elements are the instructions for how the browser DOM should be created. We can create a React element to represent an H1 using React.createElement. React.createElement H1, null, baked salmon. The first argument defines the type of element that we wish to create. In this case, we want to create a heading 1 element. The third argument represents the element's children, any nodes that are inserted between the opening and closing tag. The second argument represents the element's properties. This H1 currently does not have any properties. During rendering, React will convert this element to an actual DOM element. Baked salmon. When an element has attributes, they can be described with properties. Here is a sample of an HTML H1 tag that has ID and data type attributes. React.createElement H1. ID recipe 0, data type title, baked salmon. ID equals recipe 0, data type equals title, baked salmon. The properties are similarly applied to the new DOM element. The properties are added to the tag as attributes, and the child text is added as text within the element. You'll also notice data React root, which identifies that this is the root element of your React component. Figure 4:1. Figure 4:1. Relationship between create element and the DOM element. Data React root. Data React root will always appear as an attribute of the root element of your React component. Prior to version 15, React IDs were added to each node that was a part of your component. This helped with rendering and keeping track of which elements needed to be updated. There is only an attribute added to the root, and rendering is kept track of based on the hierarchy of elements. So, a React element is just a JavaScript literal that tells React how to construct the DOM element. Example 4-2 shows the element that create element call actually CRE. X. Example 4-2. Log. G the title element. Type of symbol React.element. Type H1. Key null. Ref null. Props children baked salmon. Owner null. Store. This is a React element. This. We are fields that are used by React owner. Store. Type of. The key and ref fields are important to React elements, but well intro. Use those later, in chapter 5. Now, let's take a closer look at the type and props fields in example 4-2. The type property of the React element tells React what type of HTML or SVG meant to create. The props property represents the data and child elements required to construct a DOM element. The children property is for displaying other nested elements as text. A note on creating elements: we are taking a peek at the object that React.createElement returns. There is never a case where you would create elements by hand typing literals that look like this. You must always create React elements with the React.createElement function or factor. Res, which are discussed at the end of this chapter. React.DOM contains the tools necessary to render React elements in the browser. React.DOM is where we will find the render method as well as the render toString and render toStatic markup methods that are used on the server. These will be discussed in greater detail in chapter 12. All the tools necessary to generate HTML from the virtual DOM are found in this library. We can render a React element, including its children, to the DOM with React.DOM.render. The element that we wish to render is passed as the first argument, and the second argument is the target node, where we should render the element. var dish equals React.createElement h1, null, baked salmon. React.DOM.renderDish, document.getElement with React container. Rendering the title element to the DOM would add a heading 1 element to the div with the ID of React container, which we would already have defined in our HTML. In example 4-3, we build this div inside the body tag. Example 4-3. React added the h1 element to the target React container. ID equals React container. Baked salmon. All of the DOM rendering functionality in React has been moved to React.DOM because we can use React to build native applications as well. He browser is just one target for React. 6 rendering elements. That's all you need to do. You create an element, and then you render it to the DOM. In the next section, we'll get an understanding of how to use props.children. Children React.DOM allows you to render a single element to the DOM.6 React tags this as data React root. All other React elements are composed into a single element using nesting. React renders child elements using props.children. In the previous section, we read the text element as a child of the h1 element, and thus props.children was set to baked salmon. We could render other React elements as children too, creating a tree of elements. This is why we use the term component tree. The tree has one root component from which many branches grow. Let's consider the unordered list that contains ingredients in example 4-4. Example 4-4. I. Ingredients list. 1 pound salmon. 1 cup pine nuts. 2 cups butter lettuce. 1 yellow squash. A half cup olive oil. 3 cloves of garlic. In this sample, the unordered list is the root element, and it has 6 children. W. E can represent this L and its children with React.createElement example 4-5. Example 4-5. U. Ordered list as React elements. React.createElement. Al. Null. React.createElement null. 1 pound salmon. React.createElement null. 1 cup pine nuts. React.createElement null. 2 cups butter lettuce. React.createElement null. 1 yellow squash. React.createElement null. A half cup olive oil. React.createElement null. 3 cloves of garlic. Every additional argument sent to the createElement function is another child L. Met. React creates an array of these child elements and sets the value of props.children to that array. If we were to inspect the resulting React element, we would see each list item breakprop. Sent it by React element and added to an array called props.children. Let's do that now. Example 4-6. Example 4-6. E-sorting React element. Type Al, props. Children. Type Li, props children 1 pound salmon. Type Li, props children 1 cup pine nuts. Type Li, props children 2 cups butter lettuce. Type Li, props children 1 yellow squash. Type Li, props children a half cup olive oil. Type Li, props children 3 cloves of garlic. We can now see that each list item is a child. E. Earlier in this chapter, we introduced HTML for an entire recipe rooted in a section element. T. O create this using React. Well, use a series of createElement calls, as in example 4-7. Example 4-7. Each element tree. React.createElement section, ID baked salmon, React.createElement h1, null, baked salmon, React.createElement al, class name. Ingredients, React.createElement li, null, 1 pound salmon, React.createElement li, null, 1 cup pine nuts, React.createElement li, null, 2 cups butter lettuce, React.createElement li, null, 1 yellow squash, React.createElement li, null, a half cup olive oil, React.createElement li, null, 3 cloves of garlic. React.createElement section, class name. Instructions, React.createElement h2, null, cooking instructions, React.createElement p, null, preheat the oven to 350 degrees. React.createElement p, null. Spread the olive oil around a glass baking dish. React.createElement p, null. Add the salmon, garlic, and pine. React.createElement p, null. Bake for 15 minutes. React.createElement p, null. Add the yellow squash and put. React.createElement p, null. Remove from oven and let cool for 15. Class name in React. Any element that has an HTML class attribute is using class name for that property instead of class. Since class is a reserved word in JavaScript, we have to use class name to define the class attribute of an HTML element. This sample is what PureReact looks like. PureReact is ultimately what runs in the browser. The virtual DOM is a tree of React elements all stemming from a single root element. React elements are the instructions that React will use to build a UI in the browser.